Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, late Friday night, Oregon rolling on the road at Purdue. And I think this was a fascinating game, Dill, as Big Ten lifers. We've seen a lot of top five ranked teams go on the road and play Purdue, particularly at night, and have a lot of problems. And if you were to think there was a trap game on Oregon's schedule, it would probably be this one, right? Oregon coming off a massive win against Ohio State, short week playing Friday night, going to kind of a sleepy West Lafayette, Indiana. There wasn't really any trap game here. And you kind of knew Dan Lanning wasn't going to have this Oregon team kind of sleepwalking heading into this one. I don't think it was Oregon's best football, but we're talking about a 35-0 victory where you look at this Purdue team and say they just hung 49 points and lost by one to a top 25 ranked Illinois team. I'm not saying this Purdue team's awesome, but I'm saying like this Purdue team was showing some fight. Oregon kind of killed that fight Friday night. Want to talk about some takeaways both on the offensive side of the football and the defensive side. And Dill, there's a few question marks that are not question marks, but questions that I'm going to ask you, but also the Oregon fans in the comments section. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Oregon fans, y'all know the boys have had a blast talking this program. There's a reason we're staying up till midnight on the East Coast to talk this team playing Purdue. Can't thank you guys enough for all the support. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And much more importantly, Dill, I'm going to ask you some questions that I also want to hear from the Oregon fans as well. And let's just get into one of them. And that is, there's no question that Jordan James is the lead back for Oregon. He's kind of the do-it-all guy. Kind of got a break in this football game, which I'm all for. Like, you want Jordan James feeling 100% going to the back half of the schedule. Noah Whittington's the clear number 2 right now. Dill, is there a conversation to get Jay Harris a little bit more involved in this Oregon offense? Because, well, I'm not saying Noah Whittington doesn't look good, but I look at Jay Harris and say the small sample size that we've seen from this kid, going back to the spring game, and that's kind of lingering in my mind. Would you like to see Jay Harris get a little bit more work in this Oregon offense?
Well, frankly, the reason I probably lean yes is I think Jay Harris's style matches up with how Jordan James likes to run
Yeah,
the ball a little more. So I don't
yeah,
think you need as much change in your offense. I mean, Whittington a little bit better in space, does a good job catching the ball. Obviously, that's like a nice play he made in the end zone. But
same
he
play.
doesn't run the ball as much a physical slasher as Jordan James runs, and then Jay Harris. So I think when you add in Harris into the mix a little bit more, I think you keep kind of that rushing attack similar. And that's been much more effective. When Oregon's gotten the ball downhill, a little bit more aggressive running the ball, they've looked a lot better than kind of some of that stuff they've been trying to do out to the
Yeah, and
outside.
I think one of the pluses, you are starting to see this Oregon team really find the run game. And I'm not saying it was elite tonight against Purdue. They're starting to get really creative, and you're starting to see the run game become a centerpiece where you kind of look at the first couple of weeks and say that that run game was really struggling. I would like to hear from the Oregon fans. And again, I'm not going to get up here and critique what Will Stein and Dan Lanning are doing on the offense side of the football. Like, whatever you're doing is working. You put up 32 against what I think might be the best defense in the country last week. At 35 points, I could have been more. Dylan Gabriel airmails a pass on an interception that we just don't see him make many mistakes like that. I think the second storyline on the offensive side of the football, Dill, I got two other storylines in my notes. One, the continued emergence of Evan Stewart as that vertical element in this Oregon offense. We always said that the peak of this Oregon offense is when Tez Johnson is crushing teams, those short intermediate route trees, and then Evan Stewart is kind of hitting. Dan Lanning said in the Us Versus Them episode, like, haymakers, or I don't know if he said that. It was like jab,
I
jab,
think
jab,
that's
haymaker, something along those lines. I envision Evan Stewart as the haymaker of this Oregon offense, where when teams are kind of sick and tired of Tez Johnson crushing them in those short intermediate route trees, and you start wanting to walk up your safeties and try to take away some of those routes and take away Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart one-on-one on the boundary, working vertically down the field. His emergence in this offense, you're kind of seeing Oregon find that next gear on the offensive side of the football.
I don't know if that's coinciding, but I think you're starting to see Dylan Gabriel really settle in, and it's looking more like it looked like with Bo Nix, where the ball, like,
Yeah.
it's coming
Yeah.
out really quick. He looks really comfortable. He's making like, again, you look at that stat line, 21 for 25. Like, that's a Bo Nix stat line. That's kind of what it looked like. He's doing a little bit of a better job pushing the ball down the field, maybe, which I think you like, and especially hitting that intermediate portion of the field, because obviously they could hit the ball down the field last year with number Troy Franklin, I
Troy
should say.
Franklin
But
number.
like they didn't have a great intermediate passing attack. I think Dylan Gabriel, I think you really like seeing that. Again, he's obviously working to test Johnson a fair amount, but they're doing a good job attacking not only that short part of the field, but into the intermediate part. And obviously, as Evan Stewart starts to emerge, like they're getting the ball down the
You
field.
said it best. And I think I said this to you after the first three drives, right? The third drive of the game was that 99-yard drive. I turned to you and said, it seems like Dylan Gabriel and Will Stein are really starting to click, and it kind of reminds you of the Oregon offense under Bo Nixon. Look, everyone in the national media wanted to jump on this Oregon team early in the season for the offense looking kind of clunky. And again, I think as they figured out the offensive line, all of a sudden the offense seems to be figuring it out.
Well, and that wasn't just like haters. I mean, it did look clunky. Like
Yeah.
Dylan Gabriel wasn't consistently on the same page with everyone. It wasn't as consistent and just like, okay, the ball, like guys are open all the time. They're making the plays they're supposed to make all the time. Like it does feel like they're dialing into that kind of rhythm that Bo Nix it felt like had pretty much all year last year.
Yeah, you can tell. I think Dylan Gabriel's comfortable in the offense and with the weapons, but I think just as importantly, like the synergy that we saw with Will Stein and Bo Nix, you're starting to see that synergy with Will Stein and Dylan Gabriel. And again, I think that's only going to get better for this Oregon team. Last thing I want to talk about, Kenny Sadiq, and I wasn't like happy Terrence Ferguson wasn't playing because I love Terrence Ferguson. He's one of my favorite tight ends in the country, but I was excited to get a little bit more exposure to our guy, Kenny Sadiq. I thought he certainly played well and kind of showed what he can do as just an offensive weapon within this Oregon offense.
But also just like a pure tight end. I mean, because you've obviously seen him get line up. They want to run those end arounds. It feels like they've been kind of forcing that play. But he's a guy I think he proved he can just run good, clean routes. He catches the ball. He obviously makes plays after the catch. So again, I think he got his chance to show he's a legit tight end, not just like a gadget weapon guy.
I think that was my takeaway too. Like I think you said it best. Kenny Sadiq's not just this gadget freak athlete. I'm not saying Oregon shouldn't be use him like you should use a playmaker like that, but he kind of got an opportunity to show that hey, I'm not just a 10 snap kind of guy where you get me on the field and try to get me an end around or screen. I think he can do a lot of what a tight end does. That's a really big storyline for Oregon. Moving over to the defensive side of the football, again, this is a Purdue offense that last week put up over 500 yards against an Illinois defense still that I think is pretty dang good. And so I was intrigued to see what this Purdue offense looked like against Oregon. It wasn't much. Mateo Yu is turning it on. I think that's massive for Oregon fans. Like we kind of talked about it, especially with Jordan Birch going down. Like it's not only an opportunity, but I think more importantly, like you needed some of those young guys on the edge to step up. Mateo Yu's been that guy. Derek Harmon continues to be a game wrecker on the inside. You still want to see more from Justin Jacobs, but if you're an Oregon fan, like I think you're really comfortable with the three linebackers you're seeing in Devin Jackson, Bryce, and Jeff Bassa. So I feel like you're pretty comfortable with there. Brandon
Man,
Johnson,
Devin Jackson's really coming on. I thought he had a really good day, and I think that he plays the style I think you really kind of like almost missed from Oregon last year. Jeff Boss is playing good ball for sure. Bryce Betcher is too, but when Devin Jackson's on, he feels like the guy you almost like that looks a little bit more like Georgia, where it's attack, attack, attack. It's getting downfield, making your plays at the line of scrimmage. His game, his emergence, I would find very exciting if I'm an Oregon
yeah,
Duck fan.
he closes the game, and we're not surprised. Like, he's a 10-5 guy in the 100-meter coming out of high school. You can tell he's knowing what he's doing a little bit more, but his ability to close the distance between himself and the ball carrier, it's really, really impressive. Brandon Johnson continues, like we all know Jabbar Muhammad's just like don't throw at him, and I'm surprised Purdue threw at him as many times as they did. Brandon Johnson at the nickel spot continues to be exciting. Dill, I thought one of the more interesting storylines, and as like the recruiting nerd that I am, is like I'm watching this fourth quarter, like excited to see some of the guys that we talked about committing to Oregon 8 months ago kind of get some playing time. You look on the inside and say, I don't know if they're going to be massive contributors this year because you're so good with Derek Harmon and Jamari Caldwell, but Tyone Gray, Terrence Green, thought they were really both impressive on the inside. And that kind of speaks more to what Oregon is trying to build long term. Like, we want to just collect different kind of bodies on the line of scrimmage. Those guys are going to be horses over the next couple of years for Oregon. Cam Alexander made a nice play in the boundary. You're starting to see some young guys get a little bit more action in the secondary as well. My biggest takeaway is the Oregon front seven, specifically the defensive line, continues to be really disruptive. Do I wish they kept the quarterback in the pocket a little bit more? Yeah, certainly. That kid's a really good athlete. But in the secondary, like, nobody's getting open. Like, outside of Ohio State's wide receivers, who are just some of the better wide receivers we see in the country, like, there hasn't been a wide receiver that is able to create any sort of separation against this Oregon secondary.
I
I
will
don't
say I don't want to totally minimize the missing of Birch because when he's on the field, I thought at times the pass rush probably wasn't exactly what you wanted from it today. Jordan Birch, I still think as much as you like the way Mateo U's playing, he's playing at a really high level. Tuioti's playing really, really well. I still think you're kind of missing a little bit of that depth and that consistency from the pass rush without Birch. So it's not like, again, not to criticize anyone else necessarily, but you can kind of tell Birch is kind of the horse because it looks different when he's not out
I
there.
wonder if the game plan for Taj Lupo and Dan Lanning was, look, we want to be disruptive, but we got to be gap disciplined. Like, this kid, I don't think can really hurt you in the pocket that much,
Yeah.
but he will hurt you outside of the pocket. So, like, let's make sure he doesn't get outside the pocket. So maybe that kind of dealt with a little bit of the pass rush too. You can't complain. I think the my biggest takeaway here is, like, Oregon probably, like, would you grade them out here? Like, B minus, B maybe, if you're generous and you're feeling good about it. Like, I wouldn't give them an A, and they went on the
Well,
road
because
in the
the
Big
first
Ten.
quarter was great. It felt like the second, third quarter is a little bit of a sleepy one. Frankly, you saw some mistakes you wouldn't have wanted to see. Probably you didn't see
Yeah,
like totally the sharpness, but obviously the first quarter, like that was kind of Oregon football. That was
kind
really,
of
really good.
reminded you of the UCLA game where it's like, oh my God, we're a buzzsaw. And then you get into the second and third quarter, and it did feel a little bit sleepy. And I think there's an element like Dan Lanning trying to get some more players, some opportunity. Like, that's how Alabama and Georgia do it. Like, we're gonna get a really big lead, and then we're gonna get some of the young cats involved a little bit more. Whether we're gonna need them towards the back half of 2024 or we're just getting ready for 2025. I think Dan Lanning has a very similar mentality. And so I'm not going to, like, crucify them for not playing their best football in the third and fourth quarter. But look, you went on the road in conference.
I'll always say it. I think like if you're a good team, you want to be able to play your like beat football and still beat the doors off teams you should beat the doors off.
Yeah,
I think again,
that's what you
like
did.
are you gonna play your A+ football every game? No, but you don't want your B+ football to get you into a dogfight with an Idaho like it was at the beginning of the
Well,
year.
that's
Now,
where
like
that's where our
and it's
Michigan
not great
Wolverines are
football.
at. That,
Exactly.
yeah, I think you made it. Yeah, 100%. Like, you played B football, or you probably didn't even play B football against Idaho or Boise State. But regardless, like, as Michigan fans, like, we're playing our B football right now and we're losing football games. Like, Oregon's playing their B football, they're winning pretty comfortably, 35-0. We'll cut it there, Dill. Not like a ton of takeaways against Purdue, but it's nice to see Oregon take care of business on a short week after a massive game. Like, if there was going to be a trap game on this schedule, it would probably be Friday night in West Lafayette, Indiana.
'Cause
It
they do a
wasn't.
good I mean, Purdue does, like, in fair I don't think it's, like, the greatest environment typically, but they can kinda get rolling for some of these night games. I
Well,
thought
we
it
see it
looked
all the
really, really
time.
energetic. I thought
Yeah.
they did a good job there tonight. So, again, like, that's what it wants to look like. You probably not play your best game if you're Oregon. You still beat a team 35-0. That's, I think, kinda
Yeah.
where you wanna be right now.
100%. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it again. To the Oregon fans, the support means the world to the boys. We'll talk to y'all later.